Undeliverable by KB HURST. My name is John. I used to be a mailman in a small town. I don't want to say the name because I feel like it could come back to haunt me. But over the years, I got to know many of the townsfolk, and I'd often receive small gifts as a token of appreciation for always getting their mail to them in one piece, whether it be rain, snow, or any other natural disaster. I mean, it was my job, but they were grateful nonetheless. I had been delivering mail to Mrs. Harrison for several years. She was up in years, but always greeted me from her parlor window with a wave. On a hot day, she'd give me a glass of water or some lemonade, and on a cold winter day, a nice cup of cocoa. I looked forward to delivering her mail. Mrs. Harrison was one of the few highlights of my job. She often wore a gold necklace featuring St. Jude, and I asked her about it one time, and she told me, "I pray for all the lost ones, all the lost souls. I pray too hard, but I won't pray for you, John, my friend. You're anything but lost," she had told me with a wry smile. One afternoon, I went to deliver her mail, and I didn't see her in the window. It was pouring rain so bad I could barely see 2 feet in front of me. I opened Mrs. Harrison's mailbox and realized she had not taken her mail in her house in quite some time. I put a few envelopes in her mailbox, but made a mental note to check on her the next day. The following day, I noticed all the mail in the mailbox was gone. She must have realized it had been a few days and finally got her mail. Then it was Sunday, and the following Monday was a holiday, so I didn't work that day. When Tuesday rolled around, I showed up at her house with a few pieces of mail, mostly junk mail. But the house was being demolished. I was perplexed. I asked her next door neighbor, Dan Martin. "Oh, she's been placed in Tree Valley by her son. He said he found her house in complete disarray, and one of her cats was dead on the kitchen table. So he decided it was time. The family couldn't afford to repair the house, and the city condemned it. I guess that was some time ago now. Well, they'd figure they'd level it, sell the land, and, pay for her stay there in Tree Valley." It was sad Mrs. Harrison never seemed like the type of person who lived in a house and had to be condemned by the city. Her home didn't have modern sensibilities, but that didn't mean it couldn't be lived in. I thought about Mrs. Harrison's son and wondered what kind of person would want to tear down the family home and lock his mother away. I was saddened that she was no longer around, but maybe I'd visit her someday soon. Time passed, and I continued delivering mail to the small town. One afternoon, I received a letter with no return address, but it was addressed to occupant and had Mrs. Harrison's address on it. It had red handwriting on a brown envelope, and it was written all in calligraphy. I would have disregarded it, but it looked important. It wasn't junk mail, that was for sure. I guess I could have it forwarded to her son, but it wasn't addressed directly to Mrs. Harrison. I thought about it for a few moments. I'd figure it out at the end of my shift. When my shift was over, I sat down in my truck and looked at the letter more closely. It was strange, because now I looked at the envelope, and where it had previously said occupant, it was now my name written on it. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. Sure enough, it was addressed to me. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the envelope as carefully as I could. Inside was a letter written in what could only be described as blood or some kind of splashy red ink. It was hard to read what it said, and it was nearly illegible. But the more I stared at it, the more it became crystal clear. Dear friend, if you're reading this, then I am not in a good place. I have been imprisoned against my will. Please come to me and save what little of life I have left. I'm waiting for you, my friend. Yours, Jane Harrison. I looked at the letter in awe. Mrs. Harrison? It didn't seem possible, but putting her address on the letter would have guaranteed my curiosity, I guess. I don't know. I just wasted no time driving to Tree Valley. It was a rehab and assisted living facility. When I arrived, I spoke directly to one of the nurses at the elder care home. She told me that Mrs. Harrison was not well, and that Mrs. Harrison had taken ill with a severe fever. She had been in and out of consciousness for the last few days, and most likely was going to be put on hospice care the next day. I asked if I could see her, and the nurse sighed. She nodded her head and then told me which room to go to. She's there, but doubtful she'll recognize you or even respond. I didn't care. I needed to see Mrs. Harrison for myself. I went to Mrs. Harrison's room, and when I got there, she was out. She was deep sleep, and I noticed there was a bouquet of flowers on her nightstand. Ugh, Mrs. Harrison, I'm gonna miss our chats. Her eyelids began to flicker, and just as she began to open them, a man stormed into the room. She shortly closed her eyes again. What's the meaning of this? Oh, my name is John. I'm a friend of Mrs. Harrison's. Well, I'm her son, Archie. She shouldn't be disturbed. I'm very sorry about her situation, I said. The man was wearing a gold necklace with the image of St. Jude on it. Where had I seen it before? Then I recalled Mrs. Harrison had worn it often, and she had prayed with it. Look, I'm sorry you have to see her like this. I'm sure it's a shock. My mother took ill overnight. I found her like this in her home, a mold-filled cesspool. Had the damn place destroyed. It's what killed her. I looked at her. Mrs. Harrison was a fragile woman. I said goodbye to her son, and then I left. On my way out, I couldn't figure out what to do, or even how to explain the letter. How did she write it? She had been catatonic for days from what it sounded like. For the next few days, I went about my life, glad I had seen Mrs. Harrison at least one last time. I had the memories of our family chats, her coffee cake, and fresh lemonade. 3 days later, I read the news in the obituary section of the local newspaper. Jane Harrison, 87, of a town redacted, died peacefully surrounded by her family. Tears welled up in my eyes when I read it. Services would be held at Memorial Crossing Cemetery in 2 days. My, it had all been rather sudden. Was this what life had to offer? First you're here, and then the next day? I didn't want to think about it. The following morning, I drove into work and grabbed my bag, filling it with the mail I'd go on to deliver, when there it was. Another piece of mail, like the last one. A brown envelope with blood-like ink, and, like the last one, was addressed to me. I didn't bother to finish my shift this time. Standing there in the mailroom, I ripped open the envelope, exposing the terrified writing of Jane Harrison. Friend, thank you once again for visiting me, but 2 lies and 1 truth. I did not live in a mold cesspool that ended my life. Archie is not my son, but he is my gardener. One truth, sadly, I am indeed very dead. I just need you to prove I was murdered. Sincerely, J.H. My hands shook, and I looked around the room. I expected someone to tell me this had all been a joke. How was she sending me letters? Someone had to be behind it, but who? I said out loud to myself, how the hell can I prove Archie murdered her? Did Mrs. Harrison even have children? I thought back to our chats. I didn't recall her speaking about it. Is the house getting torn down? Why did that even happen? I don't understand it. I'm sure it was to hide evidence, but what sort of evidence could be... Took a deep breath, wiped the sweat off my brow. I felt the nagging sensation of investigating all of this myself. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to have answers. I drove over to what was left of Mrs. Harrison's old home. A hole where her cellar was, and a ton of old wood and patches of weeds straining to come unhidden beneath the ground. That's all that was left. I walked along the sidewalk before stepping onto the property. I walked over to the cellar. Suddenly, a black cat ran across the yard, and then it stopped, sitting on something to clean its paw. I was sure I recognized it. It was Mocha, one of Mrs. Harrison's cats. Hey, Mocha, where have you been? Sorry about your luck. The cat stopped, and then looked directly at me with an intense glare. I looked at him, and then noticed he was sitting by a poisonous mushroom. I looked around. There were a few bins that contained these toxic things. A cellar was the perfect place to grow mushrooms. I looked down, and the damn stuff appeared all over the basement. They looked as if they had been set on fire, and then, suddenly I smelled it. Someone had been growing them. Then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Archie, the gardener. But why? Then, the smell of utter decay hit my nostrils. I looked at the cellar. In the corner was a black, charred, and half-disfigured man. I recognized the gold necklace around his neck. Mrs. Harrison's necklace. Oh my God. It was Archie. I went to see if he was still breathing. It looked as if it had just happened. I covered my face so not to inhale the poisonous fumes. They had a mask on his face that looked as if it had been clawed off of it. I dialed 911. I didn't know what to do next. It was fortunate that I found Archie. Mrs. Harrison's real son had actually been dead for years. He died in childbirth. Mrs. Harrison's will had left all of her belongings to her then future son, but she'd never gotten the chance to change the will. Archie had learned of this and appeared to be slowly poisoning Mrs. Harrison for weeks. Anything to confuse her mind. And then Dan Martin, the neighbor, was a witness to Archie's continued presence. He thought he was her actual son. He'd have several serious conversations with Archie about Mrs. Harrison. He'd tell Dan about how bad his mother was getting because Mrs. Harrison always spoke so fondly of her son. No one batted an eyelash. I can't explain the ghost mail, though. That's something that still bothers me. I just chalked it up as the ghost of my friend or her spirit, even when she was in her coma-like state, reaching out to me somehow. I don't know. I don't want to think about it. But I do still think of Mrs. Harrison often. I mean, I don't think I could ever forget her, to be honest. But that's my story. Story of a mailman.